Well, a funny thing happened on the way to making an Iron Man movie. They thought, hey, why don't we recreate the comic book universe that Marvel Comics has in this case on screen? Oh, that's crazy. How could you possibly do it? Well, with little teasers at the end of the movie is all you had to do. And eventually you craft a combining narrative for the big payoff, which they did rather successfully, yeah. But the problem for Marvel developing their studios is that they had licensed out their most popular characters, that being Spider-Man, who was the big star of Marvel Comics, and also the X-Men. So they really weren't going to have that fully cohesive Marvel Comics universe story on screen, but they had to go with what they had left, and so they went with Iron Man. And thanks to Robert Downey Jr. and a very good introductory movie of a superhero origin story that sticks to the material. There's adaptions here and there. It's a different era and stuff. He's not in Vietnam, he's in Afghanistan, and all that fit, and it worked out very well with what they did. Well, lately, not so much. But so Spider-Man, Sony had messed up with the Amazing Spider-Man films, and so they were in a bad spot, and their own problem and scandals with apparently the North Koreans hacking their emails and whatnot and leaking all the nasty details of conversations they had with their executives and what have you, put them in a bad spot. And so Marvel pounced on this in the hopes that they could, if not outright get Spider-Man back, they could work out a deal. That's a bit unusual in this, although they were doing this with the Hulk, since the licensing rights are held by Universal in that aspect there. But Sony was still in a position to produce, and they had plans to keep pursuing a Spider universe of films, which with Venom appears they're still following that, and then Morbius will be coming too, and all that sort of stuff. So a deal was hatched, and Spider-Man joins the MCU and appeared in Civil War, the third Captain America film, which is actually really the third Avengers film. Infinity War is the third, but no, well, yeah, it's Infinity War is pretty much the fourth Avengers film. But anyway, so there he was, and it was fine. It was, they were handling it this way, and they were pursuing this father figure relationship between Tony Stark and Peter Parker. And in the introduction, as it is, because it's not the whole focus of the film. It's what happens with Tony and that, and Captain America, and so on and so forth. But it worked out. It's just, here's how they're going to weave Spider-Man in to the web of the Marvel universe, and it was fine. But I should have seen, looking back at it, the problems that were going to occur. So Spider-Man gets his own film. So, he's back at Marvel. This is it. We're finally going to get, Spider-Man the way he was meant to be and all that. Bait and switch. You didn't get it. Now, some of this, perhaps it's the legalities of it all between the two, that certain characters couldn't appear. I don't know. You hear this a lot these days, certainly with the mess that happened to Star Trek and stuff like that, about how the rights are held by different entities, and oh my God. So even if they wanted it to be completely top to bottom Spider-Man between the two companies, they still couldn't do it or something. I don't know. So perhaps that's the problem for them. But it seems like oh God, you could have the choices they made here are just pretty awful. I mean, it's not really thought through by a good number of people, because it's the pizzazz and everything, and it's the Marvel brand is strong. It pushes a lot of people. It's waning now, as I'm taping this in the latter days of 2021, just before the latest Spider-Man film opens. But this can only go so far. But at the time, it's like, oh my God, look, Spider-Man and Iron Man will be in a movie together, and won't this be cool, and all that. And this rolls out from the Civil War comic book series that they had, where Tony Stark does become a bit of a mentor figure to Spider-Man, but he's not a kid in that version, and all that. But it ultimately, he's so on board with Tony Stark's ideas that it reveals his secret identity and all this sort of stuff, and it doesn't work out well for him in the end. So they decided to just sort of, we'll use that. The problem is that Peter Parker's core motivation for Spider-Man is completely gone. It's stripped away completely. It's not really even mentioned. It's hinted at in a bit where Peter's friend Ned Leeds finds out that he's Spider-Man and all that, and he says, Aunt May can't know because after what she's been through. That's about the only thing I can see what that refers to it. Later on, was it in this one or was it in the next one? Probably the next one, where the initials of Uncle Ben are there. But for whatever reason, they could mention it. A lot of people had all kind of fan theories that Uncle Ben might not be dead, and maybe they will get to that. And that because the psychology of Peter Parker here does fit with his initial response to his powers and stuff, is that he becomes rather arrogant, and he's kind of excited about it, and he's looking for fame and fortune for these powers, which leads him to the wrestling and all that sort of stuff, and that some sort of version of that could have been crafted here. That's what he was chasing, and then you get to a point where, oh no, Uncle Ben's still alive, and then he dies, and then that's when he learns his lesson and all that. Well, that's not what they did. So there's a lot of things swapped around, and if it's because of the legalities, that's an explanation for why it happens this way. I don't know. Of course, the race swappings happen for characters that should have just been original characters. Ned Leeds, that's not Ned Leeds at all. Ned Leeds was never a classmate of Peter Parker. He was a much older man to Peter Parker. There was a rivalry between them over Betty Brant, who was always depicted as an older woman to Peter Parker. That was actually Peter Parker's first love interest and all that, but she eventually marries Ned, who's a reporter at the Daily Bugle and all that. Harry Osborn was more the case of where they put Ned here in this version. But I guess they were, let's not just do another Harry Osborn. And I guess they just didn't want to call this guy, I forget the actor's name, Harry, because that leads to Norman Osborn and all that if they wanted to get to it. But there again, even Harry Osborn was never a classmate to Peter Parker in high school. He was a classmate in college. So it's just throwing things around. The weirdest thing was Flash Thompson. There again, why wasn't this guy just an original character? MJ is not really Mary Jane. She's Michelle, who's also, race swapped and all this stuff. It's just stupid. And the characters are completely so removed from what they originally were. Why aren't they just original characters? I don't know. But it's, it's more or less just the trappings of the story. The story in and of itself, the pluses of it is Michael Keaton's performance as the Vulture. Not really the Vulture story, but weaving it in with the context of the film. They do an interesting job here, especially with the guy making use of what happened with the invasion in the first Avengers movie. When all that alien technology just laying around, boy, all the possibilities, you could create all kinds of supervillains out of that. And they weren't going to be able to contain it. And even with this film, that's the whole point of securing all that technology and all that. Could still lead to many other stories down the road of people stealing that and back engineering it into something. Even the Green Goblin, you could back engineer a glider out of that stuff. So that's all well and good, but boy, Peter Parker, without the Uncle Ben narrative and everything, he's the obsessed fan of Tony Stark, and his only ambition is, I want to be an Avenger and I want to be a superhero, and all that. And he says, oh well, he's gonna have to learn the hard way to be responsible, Yeah. So that's what they do. And Tony Stark's there to give him a spanking and take his toys away and all of that. And again, accepting like Michael Keaton's Vulture, you could accept that plot line to a point of Peter being irresponsible and having to learn the hard way and all this sort of stuff. It might have been fine. But then, I said like the pizzazz wins people over. But boy, was it way too much pizzazz. And then he gets his spider suit, which is basically, it's like Michael Knight's kit car from Knight Rider. I mean, it talks to him. It has more powers than he has powers himself. He's like completely dependent on it. I don't know what to do without it. Even though in the end he wins against Vulture without it, with his little jammies suit that he had made. And but it's just so over the top. It's so stupid. It's so bad that oh my God. And then it's like you have to conclude he's a bit of an idiot. He can't do anything right. Doesn't know how to utilize it and everything. He goes, oh, he wasn't trained yet. And well, Tony doesn't tell him, well, I didn't count on the kid being able to break through the locks on it. Yeah, it was just really stupid. A lot of people liked it. People love Spider-Man, but you take away the Marvel stuff and you put this film out there with this stupid crap, I don't think the film would have succeeded. Because the failures of the Amazing Spider-Man films, this one fails way worse than that in a lot of ways. And yet those films, they realized they had to do a course correction, and they weren't quite sure what they would do till the Marvel deal comes along. But this is just not a good film. It's not a good performance of Spider-Man. Tom Holland could probably play a good Peter Parker, but so far he's not being given the opportunity to do so, and that's a problem. It's not just, otherwise just play the video games, because you get a lot of cool scenes and stuff in that. You don't really need the story. But here you've got to have a character that draws you in to its narrative and story, and this just isn't it. And again, the Spider-Man story as is and as it's been for decades, it's not broken. You do not need to fix it. Unless, of course, like I said, there's legality problems with characters you can't utilize, but it seems like you could make your original ones to sort of fill that spot, and so he could be Peter Parker, But surely there was no legal stumbling ground for Uncle Ben. I don't know. But, and that's not as I'm sick of the origin story. You don't have to depict the origin story. You have to acknowledge it and the effects and motivations that it has and builds the character. That's what it did. It's completely erased here. And they couldn't replace it with anything better other than, oh, wow, Tony Stark, Mr. Stark, sir. That's terrible. That being said, there's a plus side to it. Michael Keaton's performance as Vulture is pretty good. The scene, probably the best scene in the whole film, between him and Tom Holland in the car on the way to the homecoming dance. And it's like at the end where he meets the guy who's supposed to become the Scorpion, and I guess they'll get to that. Maybe he's in the current film, I don't know. But that they'll lead to that. But, it's like he questions, Adrian Toomes, the Vulture, in prison. Where it is, who he is, and if I knew him, he'd be dead. So he's protecting Peter Parker even at this point, because, would he have ever actually really killed Spider-Man? Well, he came pretty close in the fight, but I guess now, and thinking his daughter cared about him and everything, that he figures, and since Peter Parker saved his life at the end there, that he feels some sense of loyalty to him, or a debt to Peter Parker, and so is protecting his identity. And that's good. That's well thought out and everything that works. But man, it's just too much crap to make this worth a damn. So that's that. Apparently they are working on more of a cohesive crossover between the Sony films and the Spider-Man films. at the Marvel films rather, to where I guess Michael Keaton's Vulture will appear in the Morbius film, and so that, you know, it's interesting and all of that. But see, there again, it's like the Venom film, not so much the second one. I thought that had some serious problems, but the first one, just as a basic entertaining story, even though it's completely stripped of a lot of details and whatnot of the actual story for Venom, there's enough of it there that it's still there. You know, now Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock is not quite the Eddie Brock you had in the comics, but he's not so far removed from where they got him anyway. Eventually they wanted Venom to be this anti-hero character, you know. And okay, but in that and of itself, the way it did, it's much simpler in how they presented it, of this basic story of the symbiote entity and all that, and Tom Hardy and what have you, because they really just couldn't use the actual story in the situation they're in, but they did a better job of it than you have here. But you know, what are you gonna do? So that's it. Homecoming. Well, of course, he abandons the homecoming dance, so I guess the story ideas abandoned the homecoming as well. But anyway, that was the first of the MCU Spider-Man, which has way too much icing and not enough cake, in my humble opinion. Thanks for watching and listening. Say, while you're still here, why not like and subscribe and share with your many friends? Yes. Also, check out my many stores in the link description below. Yes, where you can get t-shirts, hats, mugs, all those goodies with my artwork on them. Oh, yeah. And head over to indieplanet.com and pick up a copy of my comic book, Night Night. Oh, yeah. You can also catch me at my podcast, Mr Nailsin Show, on RadioMisfits.com. And you can also watch my videos on BitChute.com and now on Rumble.com. Oh, my goodness, so many places to watch me and my stuff. Oh, yeah. And if that's not enough for you, well, you can follow me on many social media platforms and say hi to your old pal, Mr. Nailsin.